If you've ever lost someone close to you, a friend or a family member, then you know that words fail to describe the pain of their absence. Well, a songwriter was haunted by the death of his best friend. He struggled for many years to compose a fitting eulogy. But when the universe finally opened the floodgates of inspiration, the result was a song so powerful, so candid, that it has given solace to millions in mourning. It's one of my all-time favorite songs, and the story is coming up next on Professor of Rock. Hey, music junkies, Professor of Rock, always here to celebrate the greatest artists and the greatest songs of all time. You know, if you remember stuffing your hands down the cereal box to get the prize at the bottom, you're going to dig this nostalgia-filled channel. Make sure to subscribe below right now to relive the soundtrack of your life. You can do that below. I also invite you to check out our exclusive content on Patreon. The link for that is in the description as well. Our merch link, you can click up here to get that. We've got our new Vintage Years collection. You're really going to dig that from famed artist Thomas Estrada. Both these things help us to create these stories every day and keep it a daily channel. Sponsored by Zenni Eyewear. Eyewear for everyone. So it's time for another edition of our series, The New Standards. In this show, as you know, we take an in-depth look at songs that just transcend genre, decade, and fads. Songs that are just so monumental. They're touchstones in our culture and our society. On previous episodes, we've covered Pictures of You by The Cure, Everybody Wants to Rule the World by Tears for Fears, and Time After Time by Cyndi Lauper. But today, we're going to break down the crowning achievement, or at least I think the crowning achievement of a band whose catalog is notorious for top-of-the-chart hits. If you haven't guessed it by now, I'm talking about the timeless 1990s classic, Ordinary World by Duran Duran. I think it's their masterpiece. By early 1991, Duran Duran had reached a low point in their career. And you think about it, the popularity that was a given through much of the 80s, it was waning. And many critics started writing them off as a new wave relic. Their 1990 album, Liberty, that was a commercial failure. It only reached number 46 in the United States, and its two singles, Violence of Summer, Love's Taking Over, and Serious, both they were lackluster. They didn't show up on the British or US charts, really. Liberty did score a number 8 ranking in the UK, but it wasn't enough to convince their label, Capital EMI, that Duran Duran was trending in the right direction. However, Capital didn't forsake them altogether, and they agreed to advance the band money for a new album. But this time there were strings attached to that. The funding would come with strict oversight. You know, Capital needed to be convinced. Bassist John Taylor remembered on the couple of albums leading up to that one, we'd blown so much cash and not had successes that the label said, you know what? This time we're only giving you this much money, and then you're going to come back and play us what you've written. And if we like it, we'll give you some more money. It was a gut check for sure. For a band who had once led the second British invasion, and they ruled the 80s airwaves. To make matters worse, Duran Duran really needed the money after poor album sales and not touring to support Liberty and some excessive spending in a rock-style life. The band's financial prospects were looking pretty grim at that point. Apparently, lead vocalist Simon LeBon was so broke that his credit cards were being declined. John Taylor sold his house in Paris, and keyboardist Nick Rhodes was millions of pounds in debt. To add insult to injury, drummer Sterling Campbell quietly quit the band, opting to stay in New York instead of joining them in England. According to Simon LeBon, Duran Duran had fallen down the back of the sofa, and they needed to get back on the mantelpiece. The question was, could the remaining 4 bandmates get themselves out of this funk? Was there enough fire left inside to burn bright again? Well, of course there was, Duran Duran. But it was in this moment that guitarist Warren Cuccurullo stepped up and took control. I was the hungriest, he said. I wanted success. I wanted to go beyond where I had gone. I'm not saying the others weren't motivated, but all I had was my music. In an effort to jumpstart the band, Cuccurullo transformed the front room of his Battersea house into a recording studio. The aptly named Privacy Studio was a measured improvement from the sterile atmosphere of past commercial studios. No glass pane dividers and fake plastic plants. It was a place where Duran Duran could settle and feel at home. Now, Cuccurullo just had to convince the band, to join him in this atmosphere. He started by inviting Nick Rhodes, and after some persuasion, Nick came around. Simon and John would join in time. Apparently, Warren was fired up, and a font of new ideas was coming to him. One of them being that he wanted the band to write some acoustic material. He felt like MTV had snubbed Liberty's videos in part because the channel was, having so much success with MTV Unplugged that was coming around at that time. Like losing my religion. So after the ball got rolling, the four bandmates turned prolific, generating an album's worth of material between January and April of 1991. But they wouldn't just stop there. Simon was thrilled that they had finally gotten into a rhythm of working and an attitude that Duran Duran had been striving for since about 1985. Within weeks of playing together, spirits lifted. And after Simon dropped a lyrical bomb that would lead to Ordinary World, Duran Duran's apex composition, there's really no turning back. Ordinary World was written quickly in a rush of inspiration. It was like it came out of nowhere. The guys were just riffing on acoustic guitars. Warren had been playing a fast, pretty melody. But then when he slowed it down, something just happened. Nick said that it came from air, from space. We were just playing and it came out, and somehow all those bits that make up a song came together in just one instant. All I can say is that the song goddess looked upon us kindly that day. John Taylor remembers that Warren really took Ordinary World under his wing. It had begun life on his acoustic guitar, and it was not typical Duran Duran fare. He believed in it, and he wouldn't let it go. When the band had gotten enough of the song done to share their progress with Capitol, the reaction was positive. In-house producer Nick Gatfield heard it. He knew that Ordinary World would be a hit. He was happy. And as John Taylor put it, his happiness triggered the release of money, which made us happy. It was the first time they'd had such a positive interaction with Capitol. Now, as Duran Duran continued to develop their self-titled album into the summer of 1991, finished tracks started to pile up. There was Love Voodoo, Sin of the City, Too Much Information, UMF, and of course Ordinary World. They were all completed. The album would be completely recorded by early 1992 with an impending release by Capitol Records in the US. Though the album was self-titled, the record has become known as the Wedding Album, because its cover art is a collage of wedding photos of the band members' parents, which was an iconic gesture that was suggested by Nick Rhodes, who was actually suffering through a painful divorce at that moment. The Wedding Album is filled with some of Duran Duran's career best material, in my opinion. But apparently Capitol had cooled off on its prospects, and Duran Duran was frustrated by a perceived lack of support for their album. The release would be pushed off into February of 1993, but as 1992 drew to a close, someone leaked copies of Ordinary World to some Florida radio stations. After taking it to air, DJs received hundreds of calls about this song on the first day alone. It proved so popular that Capitol was forced to push up the single's release to December, and within weeks, Ordinary World was a bona fide hit. Duran Duran's biggest hit, in fact, since Notorious in 1986. Notorious. Ordinary World features one of the finest one of the finest pop arrangements of that time. The album version of this masterpiece it's almost overpowering. For a mesmerizing 5 minutes and 39 seconds, everything else around you just fades into the background, and you're just lost in a dreamscape of melancholy and sheer wonderment. Part of what makes Ordinary World so moving is the wellspring of grief that it's drawn from. When Simon LeBon wrote the lyrics to Ordinary World, he had someone close to him on his mind. Years before, during the days of Duran Duran's Big Thing sessions, Simon lost someone he called his very, very, very best friend. His name was David Miles. He died from a heroin overdose. Simon has not talked in great detail about his friend's death, at least not publicly. And he was reluctant to speak about Ordinary World's origin for over a decade. Now, accounts differ concerning the circumstances, so it isn't easy to pinpoint exactly what happened. But whatever led up to that overdose, Simon clearly blamed himself. He knew his friend was struggling, and Simon believed that if he had reached out to David that very night, he might have prevented him from going to see his heroin supplier. David's death shook Simon to the core, and it haunted him for years afterward. Like, "Where's my friend when I need you most? Gone away." That lyric. When I need you most. Though Ordinary World became a definitive mourning cry for dealing with the loss of a friend, it wasn't the first song that he wrote about it. Ordinary World became the second in a trilogy of songs. The first was Do You Believe in Shame? That was released in 1989. Do you believe in shame? Ordinary World would come next in 1992, and then the culminating piece was Out of My Mind. That was released in 1997. John Taylor has noted that when introducing Ordinary World on stage, Simon often refers to losing David and how it took him writing 3 songs about that experience before he could truly get through it. And Simon said, "I'm not a big believer in the supernatural, but 6 years after the death of my friend David Miles, I started to feel a weight inside me. Ordinary World was the act of letting that go." Ordinary World is a song with a multitude of layers. In one respect, it is an epitaph, paying homage to the fallen friends and family in our lives, but it can also be understood as a lament for our own lost innocence. That's how I've seen it. Sometimes the person we mourn losing the most is ourselves. A coming to terms with our own inability to turn back the clock can be a harrowing experience as well. I believe the Ordinary World speaks powerfully to this bittersweet realization. In a preface to a live performance of Ordinary World from London in 2005, Simon LeBon said, "You know, we all have to deal with issues in this life, and we just have to get on with it." And that's what this song is about. It's about getting through the really hard times and believing that life just has to go on. For me, there are 3 emotional parts to this song. There's a part of the song that's sad, it makes you want to cry, for the devastating loss. There's another that's deeply introspective, where you realize the importance of life and your true priorities, and the end that brings a resounding feeling of triumphant joy, of having survived, and the gratitude that comes from having lived those memories and the happiness it has brought to you, that those memories are always with you. Whether we're grieving for someone that we've lost or a part of ourselves that's gone, Ordinary World is pretty much the perfect song to help us cope. It's like a passageway through the darkness, one that brings us into the light and the hope on the other side. And the way Simon LeBon delivers those emotions and those lyrics, it's just incredibly moving. And by the time the song is finished, it's just tattooed on your soul, upon your soul forever. The first time I heard Ordinary World, it was incredibly tender. And the song has only deepened for me over time as I've experienced true heartbreak, of losing a relationship. And then it somehow transcended every emotion I've had in my life up to that point when I lost my dad a few years ago. I mean, the pain was so overwhelming. I was completely helpless for days. When Simon sings, "I won't cry for yesterday," there's an ordinary world somehow I have to find. You not only feel his depth of yearning for some kind of normalcy, but you also sense a striving resilience. I mean, he's near overcome, yet he's moving forward in faith. Someone encouraged that he didn't know that he had. And this song did that for me. I mean, it picked me up off the ground and it soldiered me forward. It's a debt that I can never repay. And that's what great music does. It's the supreme ointment for our most severe wounds. The amazing thing about Ordinary World is it has even more layers still. I mean, in the final verse, the song broadens into a global embrace. And we start to recognize that though our own pain is very real, we're not alone in feeling it. Papers in the roadside tell of suffering and greed.
In the roadside tell of suffering and greed.
Feared today, forgot tomorrow. Here besides the news of holy war and holy need, ours is just a little sorrow talk.
Ours is just a little sorrow talk.
That has my vote for one of the greatest closing verses in music history. It's always timely. That's the thing about it. It's as timely in the world of COVID and media overload as it was in '93. Nick Rhodes said in '98, "I think Simon just felt our world was a melee of complete chaos." Ordinary World was written from a very heartfelt point of view. And it is important to remember that Ordinary World was written to the backdrop of the Gulf War in Iraq. People watched the horrific televised images of war and poverty. Families were separated from loved ones who were serving up to half a world away. Ordinary World captures the sense of shock and insecurity experienced by so many during this time, and it still speaks of that today. Like I said, the last verse, it just puts everything into perspective. It makes you realize that your own story is only a paragraph in a much bigger library of volumes. As tragic and devastating as our individual losses are, these lyrics remind us that there's a wide world of people who are struggling with pain and grief that is just as real as our own. And though it can break your heart to think about it, it can also be comforting to know that we're not alone. We are never alone if we can remain in empathy and bear each other's burdens. Now, Ordinary World went to number 3 on the US Billboard Hot 100. It went to number 2 on the US Alternative Airplay chart, and it went to number 1 on the US Mainstream Top 40 Airplay chart. Though the band was disappointed that Ordinary World only reached number 6 in the UK, it was still a massive global success. I mean, it went to number 5 in Norway, to number 3 in New Zealand, and Ireland, went to number 2 in Sweden and Iceland, and number 1 in Canada and Italy. I mean, all over the place. It's been used in film and TV so much, at Baywatch in '94. Playing The Field 99, Grey's Anatomy, Layer Cake, Cold Case, Car Share, Everything Sucks, that came out in 2018. It also featured recently on a trailer for the Netflix show Sweet Tooth. Ordinary World is one of those rare songs that makes you conscious that you are experiencing unparalleled greatness while you're listening to it. I mean, listening to it removes you from wherever you are, and it transports you to an otherworldly plane where nothing else can touch you. You become one with the song. Those 5.5 minutes become the boundaries of your existence. It is a state of undefiled musical nirvana. It's truly just a tonic of bliss and exquisite sorrow. No doubt about it, Ordinary World is an undisputed, a new standard in the global songbook. Ordinary World's culmination, it inspires us to get out of ourselves and to connect with someone else who's hurting. It's just a great musical motivator to treat others with more compassion, more patience. Everyone has known sorrow, abuse, injury, grief in this great human family. But the enormity of the scope doesn't have to stop us from trying to do some good. No matter how big or small the act, there's always something that we can do to make someone else's life better. And that's what the song is saying as it closes out. And Simon sings, "Everyone is my world. I will learn to survive." It's an impassioned plea and a call for all of us to simply unite. Leave us a comment about Duran Duran and this visceral and intensely moving masterpiece. What are your memories of Ordinary World? Share some of those experiences below. If you enjoyed this episode, be sure to check out other pieces that we did on songs that are just masterful from the same era, Losing My Religion by REM and others. If you dig our content, don't forget to subscribe below. We'd love to have you. Hit the bell so you never miss out on our daily content. And we'd love to have you as part of our Patreon. And just help us keep the music alive. That's the idea. Until next time, 3 chords and the truth, my friends.